Anyway, so I want to talk a little bit this morning about change. And just for fun, I thought I'd start with a great article I read in Forbes magazine when I was at the dentist the other day. The article is entitled 3 Signs That You Need a Change of Career. Don't know why I was reading it, don't get the wrong idea. So this article is all about change in your professional life, particularly. And according to the author, the first sign that you might need to make a change in that area of your life is that you are chronically worn out, exhausted, and depleted. Listen to this. He says, if you don't like your work, it won't like you back. And overly stressful, misaligned work can very easily make your body break down. So apparently there is some truth in the saying, this job is killing me. Another sign that you might need to make a change in that area of your life is that your skills and responsibilities and tasks are not your passion. I thought this was interesting. Apparently some people can be really, really good at a job they really, really hate. I have a friend like this back home. His passion is English literature, loves it. However, his job is working as an accountant in the bank. And all the time on Facebook, he posts about, I got to go to this stupid meeting and meet this stupid person and do all these stupid things that I couldn't care less about. Not quite concerning that he works at the bank. I'm glad I don't bank there. Couldn't care less about anything he does. He's not interested in it, not passionate about it, doesn't enjoy it. So he might relate to this next one. Apparently, another sign that you need to make a change of career is that you've come to the point where your salary no longer makes up for the boredom and the emptiness that you feel. Apparently, studies show that the number one reason people don't leave jobs that they hate is because of money. So, I hate this, but it pays the bill, is an attitude that keeps people where they are, even if they hate where they are. And it's not just in our careers, of course. In almost every area of our life, every now and again, we get the feeling that we'd like to make a change. And those feelings inevitably come with fantasies. We get a mental image of what we'll look like once we've lost all the weight, or of the fun we'll have when we travel all the places we'd like to travel, or the things we'll buy with the royalties we get from our best-selling book, or of leaving our job and starting our own business, or if we have our own business, getting rid of it and getting a job with a paycheck. There's not a single person in this room who wouldn't like to make some kind of a change in some kind of area of their life, and most of us, perhaps all of us, have some idea of what that change is and what it would look like and so on. Now, an important aspect of change in life is thinking through your capacity, your willingness to make the changes that you want to make. Having decided that you'd like to change, you then need to sit down and figure out if you're willing to change, if you're able to change. And it is this very language that we hear from Jesus in this morning's Bible reading. This morning's part of the Bible says to us, in essence, okay, so you've decided to live as a Christian. Good for you. What you need to do now is sit down and figure out if that's something you're actually willing to do and able to do. So in Luke chapter 14 and verse 25, we're told that large crowds are traveling with Jesus. Notice, please, the large crowds, the big numbers. And turning to those large crowds, Jesus says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Now, the word disciple was one of Jesus' favorite words. It comes from a Greek word meaning to learn, and so a disciple simply is a person who learns. And what they learn is how they can be a bit more like their teacher. And in first century Israel, this was a big aspiration for lots of people. Lots of people in Jesus' culture, when they were feeling dissatisfied with their life, or they felt life wasn't going all that well and they needed to make a change, they would look at their local rabbi and they would say to themselves, well, that's quite a prestigious job, seems to be quite a fulfilling job, Rabbi always seems to be happy, Rabbi's life seems to go quite well, I would like to be like him. And this is what the word disciple means, the word talmid in Hebrew, to learn how to be like this person. And so what people would do is they would make an application to their local rabbi and see if they could sign up for a 3, 4, 10-year course of study, the purpose of which was that they might become like their rabbi. And it seems at this stage in Jesus' career, he's pulling in lots of applications. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. He's quite successful at this point, quite dynamic, saying lots of interesting things. So lots and lots of people want to be like him, want to follow him, want to learn from him. And at this point, Jesus turns to this large crowd, and he just gets a gut feeling that it's not going to work. Did you ever get that feeling when you meet someone, and you just know this isn't going to work? Right? Someone introduces themselves to you, and no, this isn't going to happen. All my alarm bells are going off. This is where Jesus is right now. He knows that regardless of how enthusiastic all these people are to make these changes in their life, he knows that most of them are not going to be willing to make those changes and not able to make them either. And so he makes this alarming statement. It's almost as if he looks at the people and he says, how can I thin this crowd a little? How can I get rid of some of these people? Because it is not going to work. And so he says, okay, it's great that you want to be my students. It's great that you want to learn about Christianity and all that stuff. So here's the deal. Up front, before you fill in your application form, you need to know that if you want to follow me, you have to hate some key people in your life. You have to hate your mother and your father, your brother, your sister, your wife, your husband, your children, even yourself. You have to hate yourself. You have to hate everyone. You have to be a hateful person or you can't follow me. Okay? Application forms available on the left. Now, the Bible is, of course, a religious textbook, and it is therefore inherently dangerous. It's very important that we interpret it properly, because if we don't, it can be destructive and life-stealing. And I say that because this is one of the parts of the Bible that we have to be very careful to interpret right. So let me be clear to say this text is not saying to teenagers that an integral part of your Christianity is hating your parents. That would be easy. It's not saying to people who are married that it's an important part of your Christianity to not get along with your spouse and to have issues with them. That would be too easy. Nor is it saying to us who tend to be quite self-depreciative and down on how we look and how we feel and what our abilities are and all that. It's not saying it's good to beat yourself up. It's good to be down about who you are as a person. That's not what any of this means. The word hate in this sentence is used to talk about the relational priorities that need to exist if you're going to be a proper student of Jesus. You see, each of these prospective students in this large crowd would have had a complex network of relationships, as do you, as do I. They would have had a relationship with themselves. They would have had a relationship with their friends, with their family members, with their colleagues, with their employers, and so on and so forth. And as you know from your own experience, this network of relationships that you are in forces you to make choices. For example, whose needs are you going to prioritize this afternoon? Who's going to win this afternoon in the battle for your attention and your time and your decision making? Is it going to be you? Is what you want going to win? Or is it going to be your partner? Is it going to be your children? Is it going to be your elderly parents? Is it going to be the tax man who's still waiting for you to fill those forms in? And all of our relationships, all the time, require us to make priorities and choices. They just do. And so what Jesus is saying here is that if you're going to sign up for this Christian thing, the winner in those choices must always be Jesus. The top priority must always be Jesus. And so according to Jesus, a person who wants to follow him must follow him. And following is not easy. And so what he says in this extremely put sentence is not that we are actually to hate people in our lives, for that would contradict lots of other parts of the Bible. He's simply saying that as you make your way through this world, you're going to face choices every day. And the winner in those choices must always be the God whom you say you follow. And he wants these large crowds to know this up front before they go any further, before they waste another day of their life on this religious project. And having said that, I think Jesus puts his hands in his pockets and he looks down and he expects everyone to leave. I think he wants everyone to leave. I think he doesn't want to waste anyone's time. And so he's quite surprised. He looks up and some of them, perhaps most of them, are still standing there. And they're still thinking to themselves, okay, I can do that. I can choose Jesus as my number one priority every day, no problem. I can do this, I can, whatever. I'll jump through any hoop. Jump over any obstacle, no problem, I can do it. And so then Jesus ups the ante. He says, okay, I'll try and get rid of a few more of you. He says, anyone who does not carry his own cross and follow me cannot be my student. Now, in our culture, of course, the cross is a symbol of religion, and to see it or hear it referenced is always to arouse religious thoughts and feelings for us. In Jesus' culture, however, as you know, the cross wasn't like that. The cross was exclusively a symbol of death, of punishment, and a particular kind of death and punishment, a death and punishment reserved exclusively for the lowest of the low, for the most reprobate within society. And so for these large crowds to hear Jesus say, if you want to learn from me and sign up for this thing I'm talking about, you have to take up this death, this shame, this punishment of reprobates, and make that your own, is for them to instantly understand that following Jesus involves some kind of dying to your own life, to your own preferences, to your own needs, to your own desires. And it also involves, at least at this early stage, ending up in dire straits. This is what Jesus seems to be saying. Follow me and you'll get none of the things you want, and you'll get a lot of the things you don't want. Application forms available on the left. And so once again, we see Jesus as making it clear to his would-be students that what lies ahead of them is that in the choice between what they want in their life and for their life and what God wants in their life and for their life, God must always be the winner in those choices. Self-denial, embracing a set of priorities that are simply not our own, it seems are mandatory features of this Christian life that Jesus spoke of. And Jesus wanted his would-be followers to know ahead of time that following him would often involve hardship, and the nature of that hardship revolved around the premise that each of his followers would have to live his or her life for God and for other people, and have a casual regard at best for his or her own needs and desires. And I think that seems strange to us, certainly unwelcome. It doesn't just seem strange to us as human beings, it seems strange to us as 21st century North American Christians. The the underlying premise, I think, of the Christianity that we are used to is that it takes as its starting point the needs and the problems of humankind, and then its message is that here's how God can meet these needs and fulfill these aspirations. And in this train of thought, faith is akin to, or indeed the means of, life enhancement. So if you're ill, it can make you better. If you're unhappy, it can make you fulfilled. If you're unsuccessful, it can make you prosperous. If you have a low self-esteem, it can make you feel positive. Whatever you currently feel is spoiling your life, God is the answer. So the story goes. This is what we're used to. And Christianity in that guise, in that package, isn't difficult at all. It's incredibly positive. It's incredibly life-giving. And yet the message of the New Testament seems to be not like that. The message of Jesus, at least, seems to be that this Christian thing is paved not with self-fulfillment and self-improvement, but the antitheses of these things. Self-abandonment, self-denial, the lessening of your life, not the improving of it. Christianity that we know it may often be easy and great and fulfilling, but I think it's sometimes not the Christianity that Jesus foresaw. And what I like about Jesus, I find myself saying this quite a lot actually, is that he's not like Rogers, you know what I mean? There's nothing in the small print. There's no excuse for me to be surprised in the Jesus thing, because Jesus was very upfront about it. And then having made that horrible point, and I think it is horrible, I'm not saying I agree with any of this, I'm just saying this is what it says. I'm not saying I like any of this, I'm just explaining it. This is what Jesus said. And having said it, he then illustrates the point twice. First illustration, he says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he first not sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. So Jesus here is speaking about some hypothetical farmer. Of course, most of his audience are farm workers, so they understand this language well. And this hypothetical farmer wants to build a watchtower in the corner of his fields so that he can look out for cattle rustlers or wild animals or whatever at night time. And Jesus says this scenario is a no-brainer. You all understand this scenario. There's a farmer, and you get that if he plans to build one of these towers that you see all across the countryside, before he builds that tower, he, if he's sensible, is going to sit down and do his homework. And this homework will involve asking all sorts of questions. Do I have enough money? Do I have the skills and resources and time available to finish this project? Am I able to finish what I start? Am I able to do what I plan to do? Because the second I lay a foundation for a tower, everyone in the village is going to assume that a tower is going to follow. And if I can't do that, if I start something, and then what I start is followed by nothing, this will render the foundation, however sincere, however genuine, a complete waste of time and money, and everyone will think I'm an idiot. When I was in high school, I got into the Jesus thing in the last year of high school. And there was a bunch of us who did. Strange, I suppose, but there was just a bunch of us who did, and went to a church with a big group of teenagers in it, and everyone was very keen, everyone was very enthusiastic. And, today, 20, 30 years later, there aren't too many of us still doing the Christian thing, still doing the Jesus thing. And the enthusiasm of the early days, in the case of many, was a waste of time. It was damaging, actually. Far better for some never to have been enthusiastic, never to have signed up for those things, is the point Jesus is making. Then he gives another illustration. When Jesus gives an illustration twice, you can tell it's important. You can tell there's a big deal happening here. He says, suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he is not, he will send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and sue for peace. In the school I went to, I suppose all high schools are a bit like this. The boys at least used to fight at recess time for, just used to have fights for fun, for recreation. And in that aggressive environment, I very quickly became familiar with the term, don't start what you can't finish. Is this a phrase you have in Canada? Don't start what you can't finish. No point going up to the toughest guy in school and starting a fight, because although you start that fight, you won't be ending it. The last punch, the last headbutt, the last kick, the last knee, or whatever, will always be his. So this hypothetical soldier in this illustration finds himself facing the hardest guy in the school. So what's he going to do? If he fights, he'll lose, and so he makes peace. This is a no-brainer. Then Jesus explains the illustration in the next sentence. He says, in the same way, I can see some of you are still standing there listening to me. You haven't gone yet, so in the same way, any of you who does not give up everything can't be my disciple. You're kidding, Jesus, right? Like, come on. Is that what you meant? Like, is that what you meant when you said we had to hate other people? Is that what you meant when you said we had to put you first in all our choices every day? Is that what you meant when you told that story about the guy with a tower and the king with soldiers? Is that what you meant? That we had to give up everything? I don't mind giving up some things, like carbs. Right? Or salad, or whatever. And I get that there's some things that would be good for me to give up. Right? We've all got stuff in our life that would be good to give up. Credit cards. Whatever. There's a whole bunch of things in my life that I actually quite like. Why are you attacking me so comprehensively, Jesus? Why are you being so stern about this? What on earth do you mean? I think what he means, and I can only think it's so aggressive. It's hard to understand it. I think what he means in this context, talking to so many potential students, so many people interested in Christianity, is don't underestimate the difficulties of Christianity. Don't underestimate how hard it often is and always is to live the life you have as a follower of Jesus. Don't be surprised by how hard it is. Don't be shocked by how many mistakes you often make. It's tough. It's difficult. Then he says, another illustration, salt is good. I don't care what the doctor says. It is. Do you ever have those kind of conversations with your doctors? If you don't stop taking salt, you'll die early. And then you're thinking, how early? The salt that Jesus is talking about here comes from the Dead Sea, which, unlike our salt, has all sorts of impurities in it, and so it would quite often go off. And once it went off, it was good for absolutely nothing. Now, the salt that Jesus knew was, well, I won't get into what it was used for. It would be very boring. But the whole point of salt is to be salt. I went to university to learn that. The point of salt is to be salt. The raison d'etre of salt is to be salt. And so therefore, if salt ceases to be salted, it becomes useless and, as Jesus says, is thrown out good for nothing. And we could say the same philosophically of almost anything. Take a car, for example. The whole point of a car is to be a car. And if a car loses some of its essential car-like characteristics, such as forward motion, then it becomes quite useless as a car, and it's time to throw it away. The point that Jesus makes in this rather obvious point is that a person who enrolls on this Jesus-following thing without being willing to meet the demands involved, make the required changes, make the necessary choices, that person has unthinkingly placed himself in the same position of the farmer who couldn't finish his tower, or the king who couldn't win his fight, and is somewhat useless. Better that they never began. Don't know why. But why, before we take any questions that you may have, why does Jesus end this really horrible? I'm not sure if Jesus was in a bad mood this day or what, but why does he end this by saying, "He who has ears, let him hear"? Like in a few short sentences, he's given 3 illustrations. And in the sentences that aren't illustrations, he's given stark warnings, used very extreme language. This is difficult. Christianity is hard. He who has ears, let him hear. So what do we take from this? What I take from this is that it's okay if I find it difficult to be a Christian. Jesus foresaw this. It's okay if sometimes I'm reading the Bible or working through some issues and I find this tension going on inside of me between what's right and wrong, between what Jesus would ask of me and what I would ask of myself. It's okay to have this struggle inside of me. This is a normal part of the Christian life. And I find that comforting. I also find it challenging that Jesus says my choices should always veer towards what he wants and not what I want. I also find it, what I take from this is that I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but I've noticed that in life you don't always get what you want. And I think particularly as you go older, you get to a place where you realise this wasn't the plan. This wasn't where I thought I'd be. This wasn't how I thought I'd feel. This wasn't what I thought I'd be doing. Whatever it is God is for, it seems he's not for that. He's not for giving us all the things that we think we want all the time. He's for something else. And whatever that something else is, it's probably better and more important. Any questions? Well, I use the P word to refer to things that... The P word, the persecution word in North America, is essentially a whine. It's a childish whine. Being made fun of for going to church, or for wearing a cross, or for having a view on the Bible, or biblical ethics, or whatever, is not persecution. That's part of the happy consequence of living in the kind of country, free country that we do. And that's not the same, and it makes a mockery, in fact, of someone who lives in southern Sudan, who, as you correctly point out, is in fear of their life for their Christianity. So people who live in North America should not use the word persecution to refer to things that go on in society that we don't like of. That's just childish and immature, and it's a huge insult to Christians who live in parts of the world for whom persecution is a reality. You were about to ask me something about standing firm in your faith.
You've answered the question.
Okay. I think I think the struggle that we have as Christians, and let's accept that it is a struggle to be a Christian sometimes. That struggle is predominantly with ourselves and with what the Bible calls the world. So here you are, here I am, we live where we do, and there are things going on inside of us that aren't particularly Christian. Thoughts, feelings, emotions, desires. And sometimes that's a struggle. Sometimes it's a tension. Sometimes we make good choices, sometimes we don't. And we have this struggle in the context of a society, which as I'm sure you've noticed, isn't always particularly conducive to the living of a Christian life. And what you find is that as you watch television, or go out with your friends, or just live in this world, you find that there's a happy marriage that exists between some of the things you see out there and some of the desires you have in here. And it makes the tension very, very, very difficult. And standing firm in our faith, more often than not, has got less to do with sticking up for ourselves and more to do with denying ourselves, putting to death our sinful nature, like the Apostle said. I think it's always too early to tell, don't you? If what Jesus said is true, and I stake my life on thinking that it is, heaven will be a place of surprises, remember? The first will be last, the last will be first. People who turn up at the front door thinking they're in will get out, and the people who turn up at the front door thinking they don't have a chance are in. Whether that's good news or bad news for you or me, time will tell. Father, I pray for all of us. I pray that in our weakness we will find you to be strong. That in our failure we will find you to be forgiving. I pray for peace. I pray for prosperity. I pray for health, for happiness, for faithfulness in following you, for security in believing. I pray all these things for me, for them, for them who they love. In Christ's name, amen. I told you about poker night, right?